Have you experienced the awesome power of the Panasonic Real 3DO system? Obviously.
Presenting 3DO, the most advanced home gaming system in the universe. It's time to put away your toys.
3DO from Panasonic, Gold Star, and Creative Labs. A new low price and free games.
Mind-blowing graphics of Panasonic Real 3DO. 3DO.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 3DO Experience, the 3DO retrospective podcast where we talk about the 3DO company, the console itself, and everything in between. It's been a while. How you doing, Threk?
Hello, everybody. I'm trapped. Bill trapped me in his basement, and he's forcing me to talk about this game this week. Please send help. Please. He was tired of waiting on me. So I'm okay. How you doing, Bill?
I'm doing all right. Just getting through December, Christmas time, getting all this last-minute shopping done, all that wonderful stuff.
Yeah, I still got a little bit to do. Not a huge amount, but a little bit. Because some of my family, they usually come in this time of year, but they decided not to for whatever reason. So kind of lightens the shopping load for me. But other than that, it's all right. Like, I'm finally done with school, so I get to relax a little bit and play some games. So if anybody follows me in the Discord, they know I've been playing through the Assassin's Creed games, and I'm on Unity. So far, I'm liking Unity. I'm liking it. But we'll keep going with it because I plan to play them all anyway. So
yeah, lots happened since the last episode we did, because that was in October, I want to say.
Yes.
And E3 officially died today.
Yes. Well, it's funny that happened, and so many people are like, wait, didn't they already say it was dead? And it's like, well, they did say they wanted to do an event next year, but now the ESA is just like, yeah, we're just not going to do it anymore. Which
I think I posted the GIF of the critic with the whole like the studio burning in the background and the guy on the front just going, and nothing of value is lost.
Well, I think once COVID hit, everybody knew E3 was on borrowed time at that point, because nowadays you don't need to do E3. You don't need it anymore. You can just go on like Twix or whatever and say, hey, we're gonna at this time we're gonna talk about whatever, right? And you just hit live on like a live stream, and just a bunch of people flood it and watch it. Like when I saw Level 5 of all companies doing like live streams about, oh, here are the games that we're working on or whatever, I'm like, yeah, this shit's dead.
Yeah,
I mean, Tokyo Game Show still exists, but I think the perception around TGS is a lot different than E3. For one, I don't think it's hosted by a bunch of shitbags that E3 was, but I don't know the details of TGS. And also, I just think the Japanese culture, they're just more loyal to that kind of stuff. So, and TGS is cool. I always like when it comes around, but
yes. E3 was kind of cool back in the day. The big thing like now is the second Nintendo realized they didn't have to do a big production and like could just live stream it with like maybe like one or two people there. That was kind of like the sign. I'm like, okay, this is gonna become the norm pretty soon.
Yeah. The birth of the Nintendo Direct was definitely probably the beginning of the end. And if I remember correctly, when Nintendo Directs first came out, people were mad that they're like, why are they not doing E3 stuff anymore?
Well, because people missed like the craziness, like everyone remembers the Reggie like "my body is ready" quote, and like all the like Miyamoto like hilariously trying to play Wii music on stage.
Oh yeah, all that stuff is classic. Or their infamous fumbling of the Wii U. Like I think it was E3 2012 when they're like, this is what the Wii U is, and everyone is like, what? I still don't know what the Wii U is. And so next year they had to do it again.
Yeah.
Try to be like, okay, this is what the Wii U is. This is a bit more concise, and it was better, but it just bad precedent. And honestly, maybe that was them saying, maybe we shouldn't do E3 anymore. Let's just do our own little thing. And I've seen people say they should go back to the Wii U 3DS era style directs that are more like kind of silly and everything. But if you think about it, the only reason they were like that was because they didn't have much content to go on.
Then Iwata was still around, and Iwata was just a goofball.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great stuff. Like I love the Star Fox. Sorry, Freudian slip. The Star Fox, like puppets, right? Like that stuff's great. But it was promoting a game, Star Fox Zero, like
Yeah.
a game that's not well liked in the Star Fox community. Hi, Chris. So you know, like they were cute, but I prefer directs these days. They are, no pun intended, more direct. They're just
Yeah.
like, here's like 40 minutes of game trailers. All right, have at it. And then, I mean, they do some silly stuff here and there. Like, oh, which one was it where they had the two presenters doing like Switch Sports, like volleyball or whatever? Like they took a break to do that. I forget which direct that was, but I remember that.
I remember a bunch of, I always remember Iwata just holding the bananas and just no context staring at them. And I'm always like, this man had too much fun with his job.
Oh, for sure, for sure. But yeah, it makes sense. E3's dead because all these companies now, it's like, yeah, just host like a YouTube live stream where you just be like, here's everything that we're working on that we're willing to talk about, and everybody talks about it, and you just kind of move on with your day.
Honestly, like thinking back on it, like the things I'm gonna miss about E3 aren't even like the good parts. I just gonna miss all like the dumpster fires that happened all the time, like
Oh God, so many dumpster fires.
like giant enemy crab attack for massive damage. Like
This game is historically accurate.
I mean, going tying into
Two
the
ninety
show,
nine. 299 was a big one.
299 was classic. My favorite is tying into the show is like the first E3 3DO was there and they did not know how to do a fucking presentation. It was great.
Yeah, like people forget the 3DO was even there. But if I remember, like the early E3s were just like trade shows. They weren't open to the public or anything. So a lot of the presentations, like Nintendo's presentation, was essentially a PowerPoint where it's like, oh, here's our sales trends in the last, financial quarter, and here's, where we're predicting to go. And, with the announcement of the Nintendo 64, we expect like a 30% market increase by the end of fiscal quarter. Like, who gives a fuck, right?
Yeah.
Like, show me Mario. But E3 was different than what it became. And I just think it became a beast that was too big to tame. And that it needed to change drastically or it was just going to die. And I think they weren't willing to do the steps they needed to do to change it properly. Because which E3 was all online? Was it 21?
I think so. I know the later ones it was really starting to get pretty bad, like towards the end.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think they canceled 20 for COVID. And then 21, they're like, it's going to be all virtual, and people were excited to see E3 back, but we're like, I don't know. And then I remember watching a lot of it and just being very whelmed by the whole thing. And then I think they canceled it last year, or did they? I forget.
Yeah, they canceled it twice because I remember I kept posting and nothing of value was lost gif like for the last 2 years because I've always been I'm like, this thing is just a corpse that like just needs to go away at this point.
Yeah. And seeing that now it's finally dead, I think we can all move on. But I said to a coworker of mine who's really into games as well, that don't be surprised if in about, I'd say 5 years, either the ESA or some other company decides to try to bring back E3 or do something E3 adjacent to try to get the magic back.
You're going to see a lot of hello fellow kids.
Yeah, but it's not going to work, No. I mean, and you even have like Jeff Keighley with, the Game Awards and Gamescom and Summer Game Fest. Well, he doesn't do Gamescom, but like Summer Game Fest, all that stuff, where I think he's maybe trying to fill that role, but at Summer Games Fest is kind of like a whole different thing entirely. And I'm sure that'll be fine for what it is. Like Summer Games Fest is kind of whatever, to be honest, but it is what it is. But speaking of kind of whatever, the Game Awards happened.
They did.
You watch?
I saw clips. I was very whatever on what won because I really don't care that much about the winners. I was mostly into the trailers.
There was a couple good ones.
Yeah, to be honest, it was kind of, I don't know. Games have just been weird lately, like with new releases. I just haven't been
what
really.
Do you mean?
I just haven't been feeling anything recently, like that's been coming out. Like, I don't know if it's just because I'm like I'm just getting burned out on all the AAA releases that have just been kind of meh coming out lately.
That's fair. That's fair. Like so many people are making games these days than say like even 10 years ago. that I think it's easy for so many things to kind of get lost in the shuffle. And if you think about a lot of the Keeley announcements, they are just kind of like random, like, multiplayer looter shooter things that are like,
Yeah.
that you watch them and they're already announcing like season packs. And I'm like, who the hell's even going to play this game when it comes out? It's all these companies trying to chase trends essentially and have like the next big hit on their hands, right? But if I remember, it's Jeff Grubb who said the next big hit isn't going to be one of those games. It's just going to be some random fucking thing on Steam that blows up. Oh, yeah. And right now, what's the hot game right now? Lethal Company, a random fucking game on Steam that blew up that I didn't hear about it until like a week ago. And then I looked into it and like everybody's like, this game's fucking amazing, And it looks like shit. It looks like some PS1 garbage. But from what I'm told, it's a fantastic game. So it's just a lot of companies chase trends. But I think the Game Awards this year had a couple better trailers in it, like the new Monster Hunter, which that doesn't look like a PS5 game to me. It honestly looks like Rise, but whatever.
It's probably going to be multi-plat, I'm guessing.
Well, I'm told they confirmed it for PS5, Series, and PC. They haven't confirmed a Switch version. Honestly, I think it'll be a Switch 2.
Maybe
we're getting close. I think the rumor is January. We're going to hear about the next Switch, so we'll see. The Sega thing got me excited. Naturally.
Yeah, I saw the Jet Set Radio reboot.
They're doing Jet Set, Crazy Taxi, Shinobi, Golden Axe, and Streets of Rage. Like all 5 of those had gameplay, or at least had footage that they showed that they're working on. Then they said, and more, whatever that means. Maybe a new Shining Force. That'd be amazing. But if anything, that might be the whole, the Sega Super Game thing. That might be what it is. Like them maybe doing like a hub for a bunch of their older, more kind of niche franchises that a lot of people want to see back. And they find some way of, getting them back. Because I think you would agree with me that Sega just has a shit ton of amazing IP that they've been sitting on for decades at this point, not doing much of anything with, that they really need to do something with. I mean, we had Streets of Rage 4, which was fantastic, but
I think the success
they didn't make it.
Streets of I know that's the interesting part. I think the success of Streets of Rage 4 is kind of what kind of alerted them that, hey, maybe these games aren't so bad. Then like the Yakuza games, like they keep throwing their classic Sega arcade games in there as little Easter eggs, and people go nuts over them, and it's kind of maybe there's something here, Sega.
Like I spent a good chunk of my Like a Dragon 7 playthrough just playing Virtua Fighter 5 because it's just in there, and Virtua Fighter 5 is a fantastic fighting game. And then I think it's Like a Dragon Gaiden has the first international release of Daytona USA 2. Obviously they don't call it that, but
the version that we didn't get, which is
and from what I'm told, it's amazing. That it's finally
Daytona
here.
Daytona 2 is a really fun game that it's kind of a bummer we never got.
Yeah. So I think Sega are finally realizing that we can be nostalgia driven, but it doesn't just have to be Sonic. It can be everything, bro, if we get Shining Force 4 out of this, oh God, I'm going to be so annoying. It's going to be ridiculous because I'm going to be so fucking happy if that is a thing, and it better, or at least if they do something with the Shining series, because as far as I know, it's dead, and it's been dead for a long time.
Well, we got Renaissance Refrain like a couple of years ago, but that's a Tails Cop clone.
Yeah, that game's fucking shit. Like, to me, the last great Shining game was Shining Soul 2 on the Game Boy Advance. PS2 ones are fine, but nothing amazing. And then there are some DS ones that aren't much of anything either, but it's just I just want another Shining Force. Like I'm sure Camelot, they're not that busy right now. Okay, just give them a call. Like a lot of the guys who work at Camelot worked on the original Shining Force games. They're still there, and people have asked them if they would do another one, and they said it's up to Sega, but they said they'd do it.
Yeah, people forget Camelot's not owned by Nintendo. They're an independent studio still.
Exactly. So just have them return to their former glory.
Yeah.
But in any case, this is the padding for this week's episode, because we decided to return on a game that, unfortunately, in my opinion, doesn't have a lot of content to it. That is
No.
Alone in the Dark.
This game to me is like I'm gonna name the episode this just out of like this is kind of like the first thing that came to mind after I played it again. This game is literally the definition of cultural significance doesn't always stand the test of time.
It's more important than good.
Yeah. And to be honest, this is like the second time I've played this game in like the last year because I actually shout out to Retro Hangover. I actually joined them for their Alone in the Dark episode like 2 years ago, I want to say. And playing it again now, it's not much better than it was then, I will say.
Yeah, did you play the 3DO version of this?
Yep.
Okay, because I played the PC version of this that you can get on GOG or Good Old Games, because the 3DO version is very pricey, and I didn't think it was worth it. So I will recap for the audience my entire experience playing this game. My playtime in it is like half an hour. So just to preface, so I can cover it all. So I download the game, I start playing it, and I'm like, oh, what are these controls, right? And then it's like, oh, I have to use the arrow keys to move. Like I can't WASD it or anything. And so I'm trying to play it with that because as far as I know, this game only has like the two major buttons. So you use the D-pad to move, or the directional keys to move, and then space is like your actions, and then enter is to go into your menu to select the actions that then you have to push space to do.
Yes.
Which is really complicated. So
this
anyways,
game has like fighting mode, and it's not good.
Yeah. I mean, the whole game is a fighting mode. Anyway, so I'm trying to do it, right? And then you're in that first room, you select a character, which I don't think has much to do.
Doesn't change anything at all.
Yeah. I mean, it might change it for story purposes, but I don't know. So I'm trying to play the game, and I'm trying to figure out these weird controls and where I am and what I'm trying to do. And then this polygon beast just comes crashing through the window, and he's got these weird gnarly teeth. He looks like a dog or something, and he just comes at me, and I'm like, shit, what do I do? And he just kills me.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, that's a good start, isn't it?
Don't you love when the first room in the game is timed?
Yeah. So what I did was I did a couple things. First thing I did was download the e-manual, which GOG actually does, or at least they scan the original manual so you can look through it. And I looked through it a little bit to see what the actual controls were. And I'm like, really, this is it? And then, so I downloaded an app called Joy to Key, which is one of those apps that if you plug like a game controller into your PC, you can then use this app to be like, oh, the D-pad on this controller is the directional key, so you can move and everything. So I was like, if I play it with a more conventional controller layout, maybe I could get further in it, right? So I do all that setup, which took me longer than I'd care to admit. And then I also pulled up a guide. So I'm like, this is an old game. It's not going to tell me exactly what to do, and I doubt its game design is intuitive. So let me just see. And so I start playing the game again properly. And the first thing the guide tells me to do is take the chest or the wardrobe right by the window, push it. So he can't get through the window. I'm like, okay. So I do that. And then they're like, you need these specific items. And as I'm getting the specific items, a zombie just opens the hatch on the floor, and he just slowly like, I'm going to eat you, right? But he's slow, so he's easy to dodge and get around. And so I get the items, I leave the room, I then go down, I think it's the stairs, and then there are those rooms that's like right by, but you can't go through the hallway floor, it'll drop dead. So it's like, okay, I go in this room, doing the things, and then the zombie comes out, and then I just kick him to death. Because again, is like to fight people, you have to select fight, and then you have to hold space to get into your fighting stance. And then you use the D-pad to be like either to punch or to kick. And it's like, who decided this? Right. And it's so slow, and it's so just monotonous. Right. but
Yeah.
the zombies are easy to kill. So I'm like, okay, I kill him. I go in another room. Another zombie comes out. I try to close the door on him. It didn't work. He clipped right through it. So I end up killing him with my feet. And then as I'm going into the next room, like the bedroom, right? The guide says, now hang on. They say you have to there another monster is going to jump through that window. But you have at this point you have the rifle. So they're like, get into a position where you can like aim it like right at the window. So when he jumps through, you can just, and I think they said like 2 shots will take him out.
Mm-hmm.
I attempted this probably a dozen times because the controls are just so bad and the timing is so weird and you can't aim the gun properly, And so sometimes it would just be me unloading all my rounds to hopefully hit him, and I would hit him maybe once. And then I would reload the save, try to time it, and maybe do a little better, but it still wasn't killing him. And it was just so frustrating. I said, I can't do this, man. I can't. I tried, but I couldn't get past like the third enemy that I came across in the entire game. And to think there were people in 1992, I believe, when this came out, that were able to stick with this game to the point of beating it and even writing guides about it. They have my undying gratitude and respect because I just cannot fathom doing that these days. Gaming has changed a lot in 1992. And even games like Resident Evil 1, which this game is an obvious influence on. I think this is what this game is known most for.
This game was the first first 3D survival horror game.
Yes, and predating Resident Evil by a good 4 years.
Oh yeah.
But even then, the original Resident Evil has not aged well either. It's more playable than this, but there's a reason they remade that game in like 2002, and that's the version that stands these days. So Alone in the Dark is rough. I don't particularly care for it, but I do have a lot of respect for it for being ahead of its time and trying something new and unique. But you can be too ahead of your time. And I think this game is a prime example of being way too ahead of your time.
So that's my main reason for bringing up the whole culturally significant thing, because Alone in the Dark, in a lot of ways, was pretty much the landmark in pioneering the survival horror genre in a lot of ways. The thing is, though, it was playing it now, you can tell just by the first room alone that this was clearly the first attempt, because it has not held up well over the course of the years.
Yeah, the game is so ridiculously slow, and to like run requires like they want you to double tap like up to run, but the timing is so awkward that you don't even really do it right half the time. And then when you do it right, you just try to hang on to it as best as you can so that they don't get you and just eat your weird like diamond polygon face or something. Because like this game has a bunch of 2D graphics as well, like mainly the backgrounds and like the menus and the like kind of cut scenes or whatever at the start when you're driving up to the mansion, right? And that stuff looks fine.
We see the best character in the game, the jump scare frog.
The jump scare frog. I do like jump scare frog.
I love the jump scare frog.
Yeah.
He's so happy for no reason.
Oh yeah, he's the best part of this game. But and then they have like these very early 3D polygonal models for the main characters and the enemies. Again, very ahead of its time for 1992. But just the technology isn't there, and I can't imagine what people thought about it in 92. I mean, I'm sure some listeners will let us know, but because I think it was some people when we did our D episode, I think it was like Dre had mentioned that back in 95 they thought that game looked incredible, and sure, but like, and that was like 3 years after this, and this game looks nothing like D. Like it wishes it looked like D. You know what I mean?
So I'll say the backgrounds are pretty nice. Like, I mean, they're dated. I mean, Resident Evil looks a lot better because Resident Evil uses true pre-renders. But I think the backgrounds look pretty nice. I will say the jank 3D polygon enemies do kind of add to the unsettling nature some of them have, because some of them are just straight up like you see that thing moving, you're like, ugh.
Yeah, the first like teeth monsters are pretty like kind of uncanny, freaky. But then you have like the zombies that are just like your like standard like generic zombie Halloween decoration, and those guys just look silly. But also your
Yeah,
main character looks incredibly silly, you know?
they're the scariest things in the game.
In a way.
So
Um
the two protagonists of this game, you got Emily Hartwood and Edward Carnby.
Edward Garnby.
They literally
Those
the
are
game
great
doesn't
names.
the game doesn't change at all depending on which one you pick.
Yeah.
Interest excuse me. One thing I really find interesting about this game is, so this game is like one of the earliest games developed by Infogrames, nowadays known as Atari.
Atari
In the,
SA, I believe.
yeah, in that confusing mess that is Atari's history. Um, and this game was actually created by Frederick Renal, and he was heavily inspired by like the H.P. Lovecraft, like Cthulhu mythos, and like directors like George Romero. And you can kind of see it in a lot of like especially like the ending, the game over screen, which you will see a lot playing this game, by the way.
No, yeah. Which the game over screen looks fantastic. It looks very Lovecraftian.
Like the art in this game. So things about this game that I really enjoy, like that, unfortunately, you have to play the game to experience, is the art style and direction is actually pretty good. It's dated, unfortunately, just because of the times, but for the time, it looks really nice. Also, there is something that Resident Evil very much borrowed from, is there is a ton of little like Easter eggs and stuff that you can find by just like exploring around, like examining different bookshelves, like and there's all sorts of lore and stuff. It is really interesting stuff to read. The problem is you really have to go out of your way to find all of it.
Yeah. And also another thing for Resident Evil is the setup with the the predetermined like camera angles and the tank controls, like to the point where I'm pretty sure like Shinji Mikami has said like this was his biggest influence
It was this and
on
Sweet
Resident
Home.
Evil.
And Sweet
Yeah.
Home were like his two big ones.
Yeah, it feels like they took the horror of Sweet Home, which I think is actually not bad for what it is, and tried to put that in a more sort of Alone in the Dark style like game, because it was like 3D way. Because Sweet Home is just like an NES game, so
Yeah.
they had to do something a bit more modern with it, And it's fair to say this game crawled so Resident Evil could walk,
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like this game, they've never remade it as far as I know.
They're remaking it currently.
Oh, they are?
There is well, actually, I'm kind of concerned about that now because it's Embracer Group, and who knows what's going on there.
Oh, the one that's coming out next year. Oh, that is like a reimagining.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was just some like random reboot. I didn't think it was based on the original game.
No, it's based off of this one. I'm curious because I'm partially a fan of this series. I don't think the games have held up very well, but when I heard they were remaking it, I was very intrigued just because I've heard a lot of people are saying they're trying to make it like the current Resident Evil like remakes. So
yeah, because I played the demo. I don't know if you did for the new
I played
one.
a bit of it. It looks interesting. I need
it's
to wait
10
for
minutes. Yeah,
Yeah.
the demo is like 10 minutes where he plays that little girl, like just kind of walking around, and then something happens, and then it cuts, and then just shows you a trailer for the game. That's basically it. So, but yeah, hearing that the new one is a reimagining of the original actually gives me a little more interest in trying it, because yeah, as you said, like with the lore and like the Lovecraftian thing, like you can definitely tell the creator of the game wants to, he's trying to have some kind of artistic expression with it, taking his influences and crafting a new experience around it. And again, I respect it for that, but just the game that they were trying to create in 1992, it's just not there.
Yeah.
Like this isn't the era of game designers not wanting to be game designers. You know what I mean? Where it's hard to be a Kojima in 1992. But
Yeah.
even Kojima in 1992, like the games he was making, like Snatcher and Police Knots and all that, and even the earlier Metal Gears, like the story and the artistic vision he has, it's crafted around the game. Like he finds a
Mm.
game's play system to make it work. Whereas Alone in the Dark feels like it's trying to shoehorn in some innovative gameplay with the story and the ideas that he wants to portray. And it's just not there. It just represents like a weird middle ground, you know? It's like as I said, like with PlayStation 1, it kind of feels like it's in this weird period where it's like it doesn't want to be fully 2D because it's like 92, it's not like cool, but like the graphics and the technology is not there to make a fully 3D game. So they just try to split the difference, but the difference just isn't very strong overall.
Yeah, it's interesting because the plot itself, other than the opening cutscene, which has this actual kind of nice narration that kind of gives you an introduction to what's going on, the story itself is pretty much non-existent throughout the game. The only way you really get any sort of story is actually by exploring the manor and like reading all the different like subtle texts that you can find. And what I find interesting is that's actually something that the survival horror genre kind of one of the biggest influences from this game that the genre has kind of taken is the whole the story not being exactly clear and you having to like kind of discover it as you go along, which
Yeah. Yeah,
you
that's
see a lot of the bones of the survival horror genre here.
I mean, and also like games in general, you know, if you think of like say like the Dark Souls series that does something similar to that. I doubt it was like a direct inspiration or anything, but it seems a lot of games these days try to do the whole like they don't spoon feed you the story. You kind of have to piece it together yourself, which I'm two minds about that. But yeah, at least with like the survival horror genre, I do with like say Resident Evil or Silent Hill, I think it does a good job when it does kind of break up that story through lore, but it works better in my opinion, a more linear context. You know, when you're just kind of following the linear story and then they're just like, "Oh, do you want to read this little thing on the side?" You know, while you're going through the game, and it can help, you know, piece things together for you a bit more.
Yeah, it's funny too because this game also has something in this from the survival horror genre that I'm not a huge fan of, and that's a lot of cheap death moments if you don't
Yes.
grab this one item here. So this game has a wonderful moment that you can very easily fall into. There is this like Native American like blanket that you can find on a
Yes.
wall. And if
No,
you
it's in the wardrobe.
in the wardrobe, that's right. And you're supposed to put it over a pioneer painting that you'll find later on in the game. If you don't do that, you're gonna get shot with an arrow and just die. It's like it's like if you anyone who's ever played Clock Tower Ghost Head, if you don't check that goddamn suit of armor at the beginning of the game, you will literally end your game right at the end. So
Yeah. Yeah, I hate that shit, you know, cuz I could imagine even back then you don't if like the game doesn't tell you, so when you die it's like, well, what am I doing wrong, you know?
mm.
So,
And I will say the one thing that this game does that I really enjoy that no other survival horror game really did was you can save anywhere.
yes. You kind of need that
Yeah.
though, because there are so
Yes.
many like when I was talking about the whole trying to kill that one monster that jumps through the window, like I save like right before that. So it's like when I die, I'm like, hey, let me just load it and try it again. And I still just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, saving anywhere is useful. It's kind of essential. In fact, the guide I looked up for this game, literally the first tip is just save.
Yeah.
Save like as often as you can, you know, because you're going to need it. And even said make multiple saves, but I had no idea how to make multiple saves, at least on the PC version. But it didn't matter.
Fun fact Alone in the Dark has a memory manager.
Hey, about fucking time we got one.
That's the game that I discovered the person who owned my 3DO before me really liked FMV games because he had nothing but saves for those.
So, how's the memory manager look on this? Is it spooky themed?
No, it's like purple lines. It's really lame.
Oh,
But it's there, and you can manage your memory, which is very nice.
maybe that's why it's so expensive on the 3DO.
Maybe, also, interesting fact: this is the lone console port of this game is the 3DO version.
I thought it had more.
No, so I need to make a correction because I made a mistake in the Retro Hangover episode. I thought that there was also a port for the FM Towns Marty system in Japan. I was incorrect. It's not the console, it's just the FM Towns PC.
Ah, okay.
But the closest thing to a console port other than the 3DO is, I guess, the iOS ports. Yeah.
Who the hell's playing this game on their phone whenever that port came out? Like, who the hell's doing that?
The craziest Alone in the Dark fans, I guess.
I mean, I'm sure there's somebody out there, and I'm sure we're making them very mad.
Yeah.
Let's see. That's Alone in the Dark too. Never mind.
Yeah. Yep. Oh God, I'm losing my voice. Okay, it's back. So what's weird though is like this game kind of just ends once you discover there's like some weird like burial ground underneath the mansion, because like there's a whole sewer section that's very easy to die in as well, because everything's easy to die in this game.
There's a whole sewer section? The hell?
Yeah, you go underneath the mansion. There's like this whole like underground temple thing because there's like this burial ground. Crazy plot.
That is ridiculous. I'm sure the plot is fascinating, and hopefully this like kind of remake of the original or reimagining, wherever they're calling it, allows for that original game, that original story to kind of, get a second chance, So
what's funny is so this game's controls have not aged well at all.
You don't say.
And a lot of people, so one thing I always get asked, because people know I played the 3DO version, is they're like, does it play any better with a real controller? And my answer is no, because they programmed the 3DO controller like the PC.
So I assume you use the D-pad to move, right?
So the D-pad movement is about as what you'd expect, but you have to like shuffle through menus still to get to combat and other things like regular mode, which is very counterintuitive. The one thing that the controller does make better is getting to run mode, because like double tapping the D-pad just works better than the keyboard.
I'm sure that helps, at least, and especially when I tried it on my little 8-bit do with the Joy to Key app, like the timing was just weirdly funky on it.
Yeah. That and the 3DO version's resolution is slightly worse, but that's to be expected for the time.
Yeah. Does it have the sound effect music on and off, like kind of controls, or just not at all?
Kinda. It's like it feels like they just did a straight port from PC to 3DO in a lot of ways.
Yeah. That's very weird. So, because even when I tried to optimize it for my little controller, it still didn't feel right. But
yeah, this game is just, unfortunately, is jank just from age.
It's a game that if you want to experience it, you'd be much better off looking up a YouTube like 4K 60 FPS full game walkthrough, no commentary, 100% whatever, right?
Yeah.
And have the comments full of like, oh, this is an underrated masterpiece, games aren't this good anymore, or some shit, like that's how you should experience this game, is through that. Like the one Alone in the Dark game I've always wanted to try is the one from 2008.
Oh, Inferno.
Oh, well, is that what it's?
The PS3 update is called Alone in the Dark Inferno.
Oh, okay. Because I've always just heard of it as Alone in the Dark, but 2008.
So the original Xbox 360 release was like super buggy.
Yeah.
They fixed it up for the PS3 port, and they re-subtitled it Alone in the Dark Inferno.
Okay.
It's not the worst game ever. I mean, it's not a great survival horror game by any means, but it's not as bad as people act like it is.
Yeah. Apparently,
it's better than most of the series, so
that's fair. Apparently, Atari was very upset with people's reviews at the time. Apparently, because these reviews are not good. They're not good at all.
I mean,
because funnily enough, when this game came out, I used to be a big fan of the Spoonie experiment, Noah Antweiler, and he reviewed this game, and he was playing it on the PC, and he just basically spent most of the review talking about like all the horrible bugs and all this like weird glitchy shit that was happening and how just the game kind of sucks, you know. But I've seen a couple people say like it's okay. It's okay.
It's like it's not the worst game I've ever played. Like I've played much worse survival horror games in my time.
Oh, I'm inclined to believe that. So, but yeah, because then there was Illumination in 2015. I didn't even know that was a thing.
That's like some weird like mobile game, I think, that no one likes.
It just says PC.
Oh, PC, that's what it was. Yeah, it came and went. The one that a lot of people like to bring up is the New Nightmare.
Yeah, I know the Game Boy Color version is got ported to Switch Online.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I played it. I played probably maybe like half an hour of it, and I really enjoyed it actually.
Yeah, it's not bad.
It's an example of something being like the Game Boy Color version being very impressive for what it is.
Like it's like Resident Evil Gaiden kind of, where it's like no one talks about it, but it's actually surprisingly decent. Or
Metal Gear Solid Ghost Babel, you know, where it's like these weird Game Boy Color ports that are like, oh, this actually isn't bad. Like the Daikatana Game Boy Color is actually like better than the original game.
You can actually use the Daikatana.
Yeah, and then Perfect Dark on Game Boy Color is actually pretty good too. There's a lot of weird Game Boy Color ports at the time, and
I mean, even the actual console version of A New Nightmare it's an interesting game. Like I have the Dreamcast version, and I have to say it's actually not a bad survival horror game. It's not the best survival horror game on Dreamcast by far, but it's interesting. It's solid.
And apparently, Stuart Copeland helped out on the music of all guys.
You know what? A game that kind of reminds me a lot of this game, although I think the game I'm referring to is better than Alone in the Dark. Clock Tower, the original one.
Yeah, but I think Clock Tower does a better job at being like a spooky, scary game. You know,
because Clock Tower has a lot of moments where like it kind of like will fuck with the player. Like to me, like one of the most iconic moments in Clock Tower is the scene where you see your friend fall out the window, and it literally it tricks you because it's like if you go and check and see if she lived, you get the bad ending. They all die. It's like you just have to leave her, like let her fall, and like that's how you get the good ending.
Yeah, that's fucked up. But Japanese horror is kind of fucked up anyway.
I will say about Alone in the Dark, one thing I really like is the music and atmosphere.
Yes, it does have a very solid atmosphere, you know, because you definitely get the sort of spooky vibes from it. But, you know, when you see your polygonal people, for me anyway, it took me out of it.
Yeah, you can really tell that the polygons just weren't there at the time.
Yeah, and like, I'm not comparing these two games because it is absolutely unfair, but like the last horror game I played was the Dead Space remake, and the Dead Space remake does a fantastic job with atmosphere and like really getting you into that like kind of spooky vibe. I honestly wasn't that scared by it, surprisingly, but it is such a brilliant, especially with the audio, like it does a really good job of like freaking you out. And Alone in the Dark, like I think it's trying to as well set a like an atmosphere, but it just doesn't click the same way as that. But it obviously not fair comparisons, but
no. It's interesting too because this game saw two direct sequels. There was Alone in the Dark 2, or it's also known as like Alone in the Dark, like it has some weird subtitle.
Yeah, isn't there Jack in the Dark or whatever?
Yeah, there is. So this series is really weird, like with how many offshoots there were. Yeah, Jack in the Dark was the second game. It was made during the production of Alone in the Dark 2. It was kind of used. It was distributed during Christmas. It was kind of just a little side thing as like to tide fans over during the production of Alone in the Dark 2.
Oh, okay. Because I know my copy of Alone in the Dark came with it, but I didn't turn it on or anything.
It's like a little cute little bonus game.
Yeah, because on GOG you get like a bunch of, when you buy the version of Alone in the Dark, like, oh yeah, because I bought Alone in the Dark 1, 2, and 3, and then yeah, I think 1 comes with that like Jack in the Dark. Like when you boot it up, it's like, oh, do you want to play Alone in the Dark or do you want to play Jack in the Dark or whatever?
Mm.
So and I did not attempt any of Jack in the Dark. Maybe I should have, but I unfortunately did not.
Yeah. So Alone in the Dark 2 and 3 were not nearly as well received as the first game, because the first game was critically acclaimed at the time. I mean, you got to remember this is retrospective reviews. At the time, it probably was very impressive.
Yeah, I could see that.
Because 2 and 3 did not, they were not made with the involvement of Frederick Bernal. He had moved on to other things by this point, so they were kind of just Infogrames doing what they wanted with the project. They're not
right.
They're not awful games, but they're also not amazing, because by this point, so you got to think about it. Alone in the Dark 2 came out in 93. Like, we're getting pretty close to Resident Evil at that point. And then I believe 3 was 95. I believe Resi was already out by then.
Yeah. And are they any different as far as like graphics or gameplay or anything? Or are they basically the same thing but with slightly different stories?
They might look a little better, but they're all pretty jank.
Mm.
They all run off the same engine, basically.
Okay, so they never tried to bother like fixing them. They just thought, oh, we have a bit of a hit on our hands. Let's just
they basically
suck it dry.
They milked it for a couple of years, let it die up until like the 90s when they could actually make it look good, and then they did the New Nightmare.
Okay, that sounds about right. Let's see sales. Let's see. By March of 93, it was the second best-selling DOS game. By 97, it had sold 600,000 copies, and by January of 2000, it had sold over 2.5 million copies. That's pretty good, especially in those days.
The game is, there's a reason why the game is so fondly remembered. Like, it was nothing like it at the time it came out.
Yeah. Oh, it's in the reference book, 1001 Games to Play Before You Die, apparently.
Yeah. I don't know if I agree with that, but
yeah, I don't agree with that either. It says it has there by platform. There was one 3DO game in there. So I just see which game this is. Because I'm gonna try to find the whole list.
Yeah. Interestingly, the 3DO port actually got pretty decent reviews too. Like, I got a lot of 70s, and I mean, that's not bad.
Oh yeah. I imagine for 92 it was really cool, but again, by today's standards, is it really worth playing? No.
And that's actually where I kind of want to go to our must play, okay, stay away. And I don't want to say stay away because that's unfair to the game, in my opinion. Instead of stay away, I'd like to say casually observe. Yes. Like, I don't think you should avoid the game. I think you should see it as like a piece of history, but it's not a game you should play for fun by any means.
I say respectfully stay away. Like, okay. I mean it in a nice way, that it's like it's definitely a piece of history that deserves to be appreciated. You know, but it's a game that's more of a museum piece, you know, where it's like you look at it and go, oh, that's neat, and then you move on with your life. You know, I think this game is definitely that.
It's honestly, like, to me, like, when I was replaying it, the whole time, my whole thought process was like, I basically, like, every few minutes I'd be like, so this is where Resident Evil got this from. Or even Silent Hill, to some degrees borrowed elements from this game.
I could see that.
Because Silent Hill is like Resi in a lot of ways, but it's also not like Resident Evil in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the two major horror games that came out during the era where horror games were possible.
Yeah, well, I think Silent Hill does enough to stand out from Resident Evil, because it's clear Silent Hill is using like sort of Resident Evil as its like initial idea, but they go a completely different route with it. Like
Oh yeah.
instead of going like zombie like body horror, they go more the psychological horror route.
Yes, and that's the
And
key difference.
yes, and I think that helps Silent Hill really stand out from Resident Evil, and why there are some people who prefer Silent Hill to Resident Evil because of sort of the themes that they try to introduce in the Silent Hill games, particularly like 2 and 3, to make it different. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So,
Yeah, it's excuse me. It's all part like the main thing is like with Alone in the Dark is really like it's like you said earlier. It literally it crawled so that all these other games could run.
exactly.
And there's unfortunately, other than that, there's not a lot else you can really say about Alone in the Dark because it's really just it's a relic of its era. And unlike D, which I don't feel like D has really anything to offer nowadays, there's some significance to Alone in the Dark still that really matters, but I wouldn't say play either of them.
No, but I mean, D wasn't even really a game. It was more
No,
just like trying to be a movie.
D's an experience, not a great
A
one.
bat. Yeah. Whereas Alone in the Dark is at the very least trying to be a game, but even still, I don't think it holds up.
Alone in the Dark is literally a game that you have to put on like your time period goggles to really appreciate.
I mean, even then, that's still tough to do because
I know because we're so used to like modern games. Like,
well, even if you say like, trying to think, came out in '92. What else came out in '92 as far as video games?
like in terms of 3D
Let's
games,
see. Well,
I think hard driving was a thing.
oh, hard driving. Oh boy. Because yeah, looking at like games from '92. I mean, yeah, you have stuff like fucking Dragon Quest V, Streets of Rage 2, Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, Sonic 2. Like these are all games that still hold up,
Yeah,
but they're 2D games, you know, so it's a little different. King's
unfortunately,
Quest 6, Hyperstone High. God damn, it was, Shining Force, banger, 92. But you know, should I really compare those to this? No,
no.
no, because they're not the same thing. I mean, even hell, 92 was Flashback, you know, which is trying to be, which is another game that I think is quite ahead of its time, trying to do something a bit more kind of cinematic storytelling, like a Prince of Persia kind of thing. And that game, definitely you need the nostalgia goggles for, but it holds up a lot better, I think.
It's similar with like Out of This World, like another game from that era that's like
Yeah.
it's really
was it the same company who did those?
I believe so. I know Out of This World had a spiritual successor in the form of a Heart of Darkness years later.
Yes.
Which is a great game that I recommend people try out. But
I'm trying to think if I played that or not. Maybe I did.
It's brutally difficult.
Well, I know I played Out of This World. I actually beat Out of This World, which was really cool. It was harder to beat than I anticipated, but
yeah, those old rotoscope games are very hard to get into. But like once you get a rhythm for them, they're actually pretty good.
Yeah, like they're definitely there's a method to their madness, you know, like they feel antiquated, but if you try to like sit in the chair and play it, you can get into it. It just takes a little bit of time. Like you need to be like, you want to do like fast paced like platforming because that's what it presents itself as. But the game encourages you to slow down and like try to think about everything before you do it, you know, like, you know, ease up, kid.
Yeah. Yeah, other than that, though, there's really not much else to say about Alone in the Dark. I feel like once the remake officially comes out, we might revisit it just to compare. But other than that,
I'd be down to review the reboot for the show because I'm sure they would be, because, you know, we could talk about a modern game and there'd be a lot more to talk about, I think.
Yeah, and we can finally talk about Road
Redemption.
Road Redemption too.
Yeah. That game's still sitting on my Xbox, just waiting for me to put more than 20 minutes into it.
Yep. We're probably not going to cover Alone in the Dark 2, which also was on the 3DO, because it's basically the same thing.
Yeah, it sucks. Moving on.
Yeah, there's it also has been ported to other things, so it's like it's not even like there's not even like the uniqueness of like the 3DO port was the only console port. It's just kind of there wouldn't be much to say. We kind of touched on it here. It's basically just it's more of this
If you played Alone in the Dark 1, you've played Alone in the Dark 2.
and 3.
Yes.
But yeah, so I'm trying to think. So we might not cover it in the next episode because we're kind of thinking about future like alternating between games and just general topics for just to keep the show going. But I figure we can probably decide what the next game we'll cover is.
What do you think?
So I was thinking it's been a while since we did a racer. Maybe we touch Need for Speed finally.
Yeah, let's do Need for Speed. Yeah.
Because I figured that'll be an easy one. And that's also one of the most probably graphically like intensive and probably iconic games on the system. So
Yes. The beginning of a franchise that still exists to this day. So it'll definitely be worth talking about. And I think in that 1001 games to play list, I think I found the lone 3DO game, and it is Return Fire.
Interesting.
There are a bunch of other games, like say like Incredible Machine or Cannon Fodder, that like, well, they had 3DO versions, but I don't know if they're using those.
I assume Need for Speed has to be on that list somewhere.
I didn't see it. Though to be fair, I'm only in like 96, so let me keep going.
Yeah,
Neverhood. That's a cool game. That
nice.
needs that needs like a port. Like that game needs to come back. Nights in the Dreams. I love me some Nights in the Dreams. Of course I do. Yeah, I'm not seeing Need for Speed. Though to be I will refrain from saying anything about Need for Speed for right now.
Yeah. So the next game we'll cover will be Need for Speed. Not sure if that'll be next week or the following week. We haven't decided exactly what we're going to cover next, but
it might be better to do it the following week just because next week's Christmas week. So things might be a little crazy.
That's true. Yeah,
I know because was it like Christmas is on a Monday? So
yeah. Actually, maybe next week we'll just maybe talk Christmas or something, do like a holiday episode.
Sure. Why not?
Do that. It'll be my third holiday special for the GNC network.
There you go.
All right. So other than that, though, we'll see you guys next week. It's good to be back. And
it absolutely is.
It'll be fun to talk more obscure 3DO goodness. But until next time, guys, you can find the 3DO experience on all the major podcasting platforms. If you'd like to find all of our links, they are at linktree/thebarbecue games. And if you'd like to find more information on 3DO, you can join the GNC podcast Discord server. We got information on all of our podcasts, GNC, Geek Addicts, and the 3DO experience. Or we can talk gaming, anime, or just general pop culture. They're a nice place. Everyone there's pretty cool. And until next time, guys, we will see you all later.
Bye-bye.
If you're not playing on a 3DO system, what are you playing with?